I'm going to speak to you about VBiz, and thanks very much for the introduction from Dr. Collette. Some of these slides I'll skip through fairly quickly because she actually had some of them up on the screen. But I'll give you an idea of what it's about because it does address some of the issues that were being raised. So it is part of the Future Industries Fund. It was actually started off independently of VDAS, but happens to be running parallel and merging quite nicely. So the Victorian Government has put in some funds to help this initiative move forward, and we've been through a feasibility stage and now we're in the application stage. So we're running a 2-year program to implement this and test it out. So just to give you an overview, what problem are we solving? We looked at the fact that BIM is basically becoming the way that projects are delivered. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. 10 years ago we kicked off this forum and we had a lot of people in the audience who had no idea what we were talking about. We've certainly moved forward from that, but still got a way to move forward. BIM plans have been very good for getting deliverable in terms of delivering the project, but they really fall short when it comes to handover to asset and facilities management. And you have a situation where FM platforms are evolving independently of BIM. So what we looked at is how do we link them in some sort of consistent and industry standard way. And that also provides some assistance on the path to ISO 55000 compliance. Now ISO 55000 doesn't tell you how to go about doing your asset management, it just tells you need to go about doing it in a certain way. And standards facilitate the actual construction process and the entire process, and Lego is a great example. You take a very simple standard and you can build great things, and VBiz is the same. The concept is extremely simple, but it allows you to do some amazing things. So what we're looking at is a standard to specify 2 things, and they're all around project deliverables. A way you can deliver O&M manuals and project documentation and so on in a VBiz compliant platform, and a way you can tag all those documents and so on to a standard. Now, what we looked at is the issue of search, and the current categorisation methods, uniclass and omniclass, don't really facilitate search from an FM perspective. So what we're looking at is how do you link all of these stores, and when you look at the stores, the critical one is actually the service system. From an FM perspective, what you want to know is the service history. But then you say, well, the service history on a service system is attached to an asset database, and it in turn is attached to other databases such as asset lifecycle database and client asset databases and so on. But what you want to find as an FM operator, I've got a certain piece of equipment, it's a certain type of pump, and it's giving me grief. Where else are we using this? And I want to be able to find it by its type. I don't know what they called it in the various databases I've got across my organisations. I don't know what they called it on any particular project, but I need to find it. I want to look at it, I want to see what types of equipment, which manufacturers are operating better than others, what's the service history on those, do some types of equipment have a breakdown history. From a life cycle point of view, when does that breakdown history start to accelerate and therefore indicate that it's reaching end of life? And ISO 55000, to summarise it, is a coordinated activity to realise value from the assets. Ultimately what you're doing is you want the assets to operate without inconvenience to people, and that's essentially what it's doing. So how do you do that? How do you know the life of the equipment? How do you know when these things are going to fall apart and so on? And so that then gets into an increasing trend of industry to look at predictive maintenance and capital replacement planning. People are increasingly looking at how do I plan for the next 5 or 10 years my capital replacement? When are those pumps and chillers and air conditioning units going to stop working and need to be replaced? And I want to replace them before they stop, not when they stop, because if I'm going to manage my asset to best effect for the people in the space, I can't show up the next day, sorry, your air handling unit just died, you don't have air conditioning for the next 3 months whilst we replace it. I have to be able to predict when that's going to occur and get onto that before that happens. So what we need to do is how do we link this all? And that's really what VBiz is about. There's a couple of parts to it. One's the tags. So looking at the existing standards, Uniclass and Omniclass, when you get down to the lower level, from an analysis point of view, there's gaps. So if I look at this, I've got air-cooled chillers up here. From a VBiz point of view, we categorise those into air-cooled, water-cooled, absorption, etc., and then categorise them down further as centrifugal magnetic bearings and so on, because they all have different maintenance regimes. And the problem with the existing categorisation is whilst they might suit the construction process and they might suit the financial analysis and depreciation process, they don't facilitate the analysis process from an FM point of view to be able to delve into service history. I want to find out on this particular site what air-cooled scroll chillers do I have and where else are they being used. And I might want to go into somebody else's database. So I may have a situation where I'm managing a portfolio of buildings. I want to find out where else do I have these as an asset owner. But I may want to be able to go into somebody's service database as a large FM provider and say, what's your history? So at some point, we're going to start sharing all of this history, and we're going to start almost offering as a service that you can come into, say, the AG Coombs service database and get selected data out of it as a service offering. So how do we do that? So the other part of this is the syntax. Now, these two are independent. It's one thing to say, how do we categorise everything, and how do we do that in a consistent way? The next thing is, how do I get these databases to talk to each other? And what we've developed is a syntax that becomes public domain, as does the VBiz coding. And what we're looking to get away from is hard-coded links. Now, at the moment, if you send somebody a link in an email to a Dropbox account, Box, any sort of online transmittals and so on, it's a hard-coded link. So if that link changes, it'll break. And probably the bigger issue is if the package stops. So everybody put up their hand. Who was using Aconex 20 years ago? No one. Who was using Revit 20 years ago? No one. So what package is going to be online 20 years from now? Don't know. So if we're going to go to the trouble to code up a maintenance system or a service system to talk to online O&M manuals to retrieve drawings, schematics, models, etc., I don't want to redo it just because I go and change the package because a better package has come online. So what do? So we've gone for a portable instruction set, which is more of an instruction to the application to search and display. So that if it changes, all I really need to change is the domain name. I don't have to change the instruction set. Where are we now? We're in stage 2. So we're developing a unique tagging system. The mechanical's complete, the fire's just about to be issued, electrical's very close behind it. We're working in conjunction with the BIM MEPOS Asset Naming Initiative, so they go hand in hand. BIM MEPOS sat down to look at how do we name equipment in a standard way, because that's simply not been done either. And in doing that, they went back to first principles and tried to remove the use of the equipment from the naming convention. So when I go to a pump manufacturer, I don't go and ask him for a catalogue of hot water pumps. I'll go and ask him for a catalogue of centrifugal end suction pumps. So you've got to take the use out of it, and that's very much a problem in asset classification. So we went away from that, went right back to first principle and say, how do we categorise equipment to a certain level? We're working with Uniclass to align their systems, so we have a very good working relationship with Uniclass. They're looking at the way we're categorising it and how do they fill the gaps. They simply won't be able to go down to the level we're going down to, nor do they really need to, because we're looking at different applications. We're looking at it from an analysis of assets. They're looking at it from a categorisation for construction. But we are looking to align them. We're developing a standard syntax to communicate with those online systems, and I'll show you a demonstration in a minute. We've got working prototype of an online O&M manual, and we've started publishing the standards. So I'll give you a little quick demonstration. I'll just drop out of this for a sec. So what I have here is an online O&M manual. And I'm just showing you this so you can get some context as what we're going to do in a second. So as a manual, if I'm on the net, which I should be, are we awake? Yep, no we are now. As a manual, it's fairly straightforward. It has a fairly standard tree structure. It's got drawings and documents and technical data. I can click on this. I can find what I'm looking for and display it on the screen. Fairly straightforward from a manual point of view. It's got some nice little features. It's got a graphic view, so I can navigate through it, build any graphic, hotspot it, and go through the data that way. I've got a detailed search. I can type something in, say PU, and give me a set of results, and then I can do the same thing, pick one of those and look it up. Now that's nice if I've got access to it. So the next problem I have as a facility operator is every service contractor who comes in, do I really want to start managing passwords and logins to my system? Do I really want to start doing the whole process of showing them how to use this particular O&M manual solution? So the answer to all those questions is no, I don't. So what we then looked at is how do we drive this remotely and remove the ability to induct people and so on. So if I just duck back here. So I'll just give you a couple of examples of syntax breakdown. I'm just going to show you two demonstrations. One is what we're saying to the application is, here's the criteria, do a search and display me the result that you find. So whether you get specific and you want to display a particular drawing, etc., that's one option. The second option is where I simply say, I don't know what you've got, but here's some information. Give me a list of what you have, and then I'm going to navigate it from there. Now, the syntax isn't tied to the VBIS tagging. The syntax can pass anything. It can pass a uniclass code, a barcode, a QR code, whatever you've got set up, you can pass on this syntax. So whilst they work hand in hand, and the VBIS syntax tagging essentially gives you a solution which works hand in hand with it, you don't have to use it. So this one, when I break it down, the first part on the left-hand side is the domain name. Everything in red onwards is the syntax. So if I want to point this at another O&M manual, I only have to change the domain name. And that, from a database point of view, is a fairly straightforward search and replace exercise across the database. Likewise, it's a fairly straightforward search and replace exercise within a Revit model. So these instructions can be put into models. We've published a paper on how to embed these instructions into a Revit model. What we're looking to do as part of the BIM EPOS initiative is have those VBIS codes embedded in the objects that come in as library objects from the various manufacturers from day one. So they're in the model. And we can put instructions that if no one does anything, it will give you a result when you point it at an O&M manual at some point down the track. So we can certainly put them into Navisworks models. They'll come in from the Revit model. We can use these codes in a variety of applications. One's lifecycle database. So we do a lot of work in lifecycle databases, and it's all about predicting when that asset's going to come up for replacement. But the next question is, in this particular lifecycle database, we've got the owner's information, and they've categorised it however they've done that, and they've named it. So they may have things as hot water pumps and chill water pumps and so on. But when I analyse it, I want to say, for this type of equipment, where are they on this site? And then I might want to compare 2 or 3 lifecycle databases to find the same type of equipment. So that's what we're looking to do. And we can use some products such as RoundMe. So I'll show you a RoundMe demo. So RoundMe, whilst 3D models are great to navigate, they're not particularly intuitive for most people, and particularly when you get out into the trades later on in life. So RoundMe is a 3D photograph. And what I can do is I can look around this. I can look up and down. I can jump over to another view. And so it's essentially, in a better way of talking about it, it's a bit like Google Street View for buildings. You can define paths to walk through this automatically, etc. But one of the things you can do is you can put links in it. So then I get back to, I don't really want to do a hard-coded link. What I want to do is tell it to call up something and give me a result. And in this case, it's going to pass a tag called MSSB off to the O&M manual, probably a bit slow over my hotspotted connection, and come back with a list of results. So as an operator, I've no idea how that application works, and I don't need to. What I want to do is I want to get into it and have a look at what that is. The other option, if I just get rid of that one, is I might want to call up a specific document, and where's my views gone? Come on, guys. Here we are. This one's going to call up the switchboard drawings. I know it's a reasonably chunky document, but it's another example that is simply saying, attach to that object, call up the manual and call up this particular document. So as an electrician going to site, no idea what that is, I can actually get all my schematics and so on. This is also a good example of information that doesn't appear in a model and probably never will, because there's a range of information such as schematic drawings, wiring diagrams, air schematics, all that sort of things that don't appear in a model. So the 2D drawing for this type of thing will exist for quite some time, I suspect. But as someone as a service tech looking around the site and so on, I can get my hands on the information easily. I can go to the trouble of coding that up. And if I go back to this thing, that's a generic instruction there. It's saying to the application, search the project Holmes Glen TAFE. The action is 3, which is display the result, and the name is a document, which will call up a document. The other thing about this is it's asking the O&M manual to give me that document. It'll always display the latest version. The link won't break. So if I upgrade the drawing, I get the latest one straight away. So where are we now? We're looking for partners in this 2-year project. We're focusing on Victorian-based facilities and operators. We're looking for implementation commissions. It applies to both new and existing. So there's a new build concept, which is to apply this from the design phase and get it all the way through to the handover phase and into the FM. But there's an even bigger market for the existing retrofit. And a lot of this technology is very easy to retrofit onto the existing databases as people start to collect information and want to put it online. This allows them to categorise it, get it online and give them a system. We're working with solution vendors. That O&M manual is built by a Victorian company. We've got quite a few Victorian-based FM operators or software manufacturers who want to get on board. It doesn't mean that we're confining ourselves to Victoria. It's certainly Australia-wide, Australia, New Zealand. And with some of the collaboration we're doing with Uniclass, we'd like to think it's international. And we're certainly working with the industry bodies. As I said, this will become public domain. It'll be probably managed by the same people who manage the BMEPOS initiatives and so on, because it is non-profit. And the only way this will work will be if it's public domain. If you're going to put your effort into standardising how you want to structure a database or code a database, you don't want to be tied to a vendor's product. It has to be public. So we're on a 2-year program. There's some limited subsidised funding for projects. If you want some more information, you can go to the website vbiz.net.au or send us an email. And I'll stop there because I've got a fairly short time slot, but we could speak on this for hours. But just to give you an idea that it's out there, it's live now, and has anybody got any questions? Oh, yep.
It's really interesting. Just wondering how you manage the security where you've got all these links through the round example, for instance. What's the approach?
It depends it depends how you're looking at that. You can go. It doesn't matter whether the database is on premises or in the cloud. So if you have data centers, for example, and we have some of these examples, the access is on premise. So outside the world, the service tech won't be able to get to it driving in the truck there, but when he gets on site, he can get access to it. The other thing that this application does is it doesn't allow you to navigate elsewhere in the application. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can code it, but essentially the options really are display me a search screen and stop, display me a search result, and only allow me to look at something on the search result or allow me to go back and refine it. But ultimately all of those don't really allow you to navigate any further than that. Now, in some cases, if it's a commercial building, it's probably not that sensitive. If someone wants to find out the performance of a pump, for example, it's up to the owner, and it really depends where they put that. The other thing is I'm using some codes to say pass me through, don't bother logging in. You can disable those and you can require login and password if you want to. So it's a fairly complete exercise, syntax that addresses all those types of issues. It's really how you want to apply it.